A grown man once demanded a supermarket manager personally apologize to him on behalf of a cow. Not a joke, a real human, standing at customer service, dead serious. We also found someone who insisted a jar of pickles winked at them and demanded it be fired from the shelf, and another guy who tried to pay for his groceries with actual Monopoly money because, quote, money is a construct. 49 real, documented meltdowns that prove some people did not just skip common sense class, they set it on fire. So if you're into watching adults embarrass themselves professionally, hit subscribe right now, because unlike these customers, you clearly have great judgment. 1. Inside a busy supermarket, a grown man once stood at customer service holding up his phone to show a photo of a monkey eating a banana at the zoo. Clutching a fresh banana in his other hand, he demanded the same price the monkey had paid, which was nothing at all. The cashier calmly reminded him that zoo animals do not shop with receipts. He shook his head and claimed the store was clearly favoring wildlife over hard-working customers. Nearby shoppers began recording the scene on their phones. A teenage boy in line whispered that this was the best thing he had seen all week. 2. Near the onions and apples, a woman suddenly froze while staring at her phone screen showing a feng shui application. According to the app, the placement of onions beside apples was inviting misfortune into every shopper's home. She flagged down a stock clerk and insisted the entire produce section needed to be rearranged immediately. The clerk suggested she simply buy different vegetables instead of moving the whole display. She refused and explained that luck does not care about convenience or a tight schedule. An older man reaching for potatoes muttered that his simple errand had somehow turned into a spiritual emergency. 3. A woman once returned a rotisserie chicken to the deli counter, insisting it no longer tasted the way it did during her childhood. The confused employee pointed out that she had purchased it only an hour earlier that same afternoon. She claimed flavors change over time and blamed the store for failing to preserve her childhood memories properly. The manager arrived and tried explaining that chickens do not carry nostalgia. She crossed her arms and refused to leave until someone acknowledged her disappointment. A teenage cashier nearby leaned over to a coworker and whispered that customer service had officially become therapy. 4. Water being wet somehow became a personal insult to one grandfather who marched straight to customer service demanding answers. The young employee behind the counter blinked twice before asking if he needed help finding something specific. He said no and simply wanted a refund on principle because nobody had warned him about basic physics. Other shoppers began forming a line just to watch the exchange unfold. The manager was called over and tried explaining that water has always behaved this way. He shook his head and muttered that standards had clearly fallen. A nearby teenager filmed the entire moment for his friends. 5. Sales tax became a personal identity crisis for one man who calmly informed the cashier he refused to pay because he identified as tax-exempt. The cashier stared at him for a moment, before asking if he had any official documentation. He said documentation was a construct designed to limit freedom. Behind him, an older woman sighed loudly and asked how long this was going to take. The manager was summoned and attempted to explain how taxation actually worked. He remained unconvinced and insisted the government would understand his perspective eventually. A young child nearby asked his mother if the man was in trouble. 6. Blue eggs apparently did not exist at this supermarket, and one man treated the discovery as a personal betrayal. The cashier calmly explained that blue eggs were not something typically found in a regular supermarket. He admitted he had never actually seen blue eggs himself, but had simply heard rumors about their existence online. Customers nearby exchanged confused glances as his voice grew louder with every sentence. The manager arrived and tried explaining that eggs generally come in white or brown. He crossed his arms and insisted the store was hiding something from the public. A teenage stockboy whispered that this was the strangest complaint he had heard all year. 7. Milk expiring on a future date somehow felt like financial betrayal to one woman standing in the dairy aisle. The confused employee explained that this simply meant the milk was fresh and safe to drink for a while longer. She argued that buying something meant for the future felt unfair to her present self. Other shoppers paused their carts just to listen to her reasoning. The manager tried calmly explaining how expiration dates actually worked. She shook her head, insisting the system made no logical sense to her at all. An elderly woman nearby muttered that she had never once complained about fresh milk before. 8. Turkey slices became an unexpected metaphor for heartbreak when a young woman asked the deli worker to cut them exactly as thin as her ex-boyfriend's excuses. The confused employee asked for clarification on how thin that would actually be. She explained it needed to be paper thin, unreliable, and somehow always falling apart. Other customers in line began laughing quietly while pretending not to listen. The employee attempted his best effort while asking if this thickness felt emotionally accurate. She nodded approvingly and said it finally felt like closure. A nearby older man muttered that grocery shopping had become far more dramatic than expected. 9. Knocking on watermelons apparently required a certain level of confidence, according to one unimpressed woman in the produce aisle. The employee asked what exactly a convincing watermelon was supposed to sound like. She explained that a truly ripe watermelon should sound confident and full of purpose. He offered to help her pick another one from the display instead. She continued knocking on several more while shaking her head at each attempt. A young child nearby asked his mother why the watermelons were being interviewed. The mother simply shrugged and kept pushing the cart forward. 10. Flirting accusations against a self-checkout machine were not something one grocery employee expected to handle that day. A man insisted the machine sounded different and more personal when it repeatedly asked him to place an item in the bag. He demanded it be unplugged immediately for what he called inappropriate behavior. The confused worker explained that every customer heard the exact same automated voice prompts. Other shoppers nearby began laughing as they watched the situation unfold. The manager arrived and calmly reassured him that the machine had no feelings whatsoever. A teenage bystander muttered that he had just witnessed a man break up with a checkout machine. 11. Alphabetical order by mascot's first name became a serious demand from one man standing in the cereal aisle. He insisted the entire shelf needed reorganizing so that Tony the Tiger came before Toucan Sam. The confused stock clerk explained that cereal was usually sorted by brand or type instead. He argued that mascots deserved proper recognition and alphabetical respect, like everyone else. A small line began forming behind him as shoppers waited to reach the shelf. The manager arrived and gently suggested he simply grab the box he wanted. He walked away muttering that nobody understood the importance of mascot equality. 12. Organic labeling felt like a personal attack on family history for one man standing in the produce section. He explained loudly that his farming grandfather used what he called regular dirt and never needed a fancy label. The confused employee tried explaining that organic simply referred to farming methods without synthetic chemicals. He shook his head and insisted the label was mocking generations of honest hard work. Nearby shoppers paused to listen as his voice grew more passionate. The manager attempted to calm him down by offering a free sample instead. An elderly woman nearby whispered that dirt had never caused this much emotion before. 13. Buy one get one deals apparently caused an existential crisis for one man standing near the snack aisle. He argued that he only wanted a single bag of chips and now had two conflicting feelings about owning an extra one. The confused cashier asked if he simply wanted to return the second bag instead. He said it was not that simple because now he had to think about it constantly. Other customers in line began laughing quietly at his dramatic explanation. The manager arrived and offered to take the extra bag off his hands. He clutched both bags tightly and said the damage had already been done. 14. Grapes being sold in bunches instead of individually became a serious grievance for one man in the produce aisle. He argued that adults should be trusted to select their own grapes one at a time, like responsible individuals. The confused employee explained that bunches were simply the standard way grapes grew and were sold. He insisted this method infantilized shoppers who deserved more independence at checkout. A young teenager nearby snorted while trying not to laugh out loud. The manager arrived and calmly offered to help him find loose produce instead. He walked away still muttering about grape-related dignity. 15. A printed coupon claiming 10% off dignity somehow ended up at the customer service counter thanks to one determined man. He insisted the satire website he found it on was completely legitimate and deserved honoring. The confused employee explained that dignity was not something the store could discount or sell. He argued that policies should still apply regardless of how unusual the item sounded. Other shoppers began gathering nearby just to watch the exchange unfold. The manager arrived and gently explained that the coupon was clearly a joke. He shook his head and said inflation had ruined even satire nowadays. 16. The frozen food aisle apparently gave one woman trust issues she felt the store needed to address immediately. She explained that the cold air made her feel emotionally distant from her own grocery list. The confused employee asked if she simply wanted a jacket instead of a temperature change. She insisted the entire section needed warming for the sake of shopper well-being. Other customers nearby exchanged puzzled looks while grabbing their frozen dinners quickly. The manager arrived and gently explained that frozen food required cold temperatures to stay safe. She sighed dramatically and said nobody understood her relationship with ice cream. 17. Refusing a plastic bag on moral grounds did not stop one man from demanding 17 paper ones instead. He explained that paper bags needed to compensate for the environmental damage plastic had already caused. The confused cashier asked if he actually needed that many bags for his small purchase. He insisted quantity was the only way to properly balance the scales of nature. Other shoppers in line began whispering while watching him stack the bags dramatically. The manager arrived and gently suggested reusable bags might solve his concerns instead. He walked out proudly carrying 17 paper bags for 4 items. 18. Divorce lawyers somehow became part of a complaint about hot dogs from one man standing near the meat section. He asked why the family pack did not come with any kind of discount toward legal fees. The confused employee said hot dogs and legal services were not typically related products. He argued that family packs often led to family arguments and deserved bundled solutions. Other shoppers nearby tried to hold back their laughter while overhearing the conversation. The manager arrived and calmly suggested he simply purchase a smaller package instead. He sighed and said the smaller pack would only delay the inevitable. 19. Peaches being too peachy became an unexpected complaint from one woman standing near the fruit display. She explained that the flavor felt overwhelming and she preferred something more subtle and reserved. The confused employee asked if she perhaps wanted a different type of fruit altogether. She insisted peaches simply needed to tone down their personality a little. Other shoppers nearby began chuckling while picking through the same display. The manager arrived and gently suggested she try apples instead for something milder. She sighed and said even apples probably had too much confidence lately. 20. Loud crunching sounds became the center of one woman's complaint while standing near the snack aisle with a bag of chips. She explained that the crunch felt far too aggressive for a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The confused cashier asked if she wanted a refund or simply a quieter snack instead. She insisted the volume of the chips needed to match her emotional state that day. Other customers nearby exchanged amused glances while waiting in line behind her. The manager arrived and gently offered her a softer snack option instead. She accepted reluctantly while muttering that Wednesdays would probably be louder anyway. 21. Free samples turned into a personal mission for one man who walked through every department demanding a taste of everything in sight. His reasoning was simple. He had paid taxes exactly once and felt entitled to a lifetime of complimentary snacks. Employees at the bakery counter tried politely limiting him to a single cracker. He pushed forward toward the cheese section anyway, listing his tax contribution as if it were a membership card. A cluster of shoppers began following him just to see how far he would get. By the time security intervened, he had somehow sampled cheese bread, sausage, and a candle labeled fresh linen scent. 22. July brought an unusual visitor to customer service when a man dragged in a dried-out Christmas tree and asked for a full refund. According to him, the tree had simply stopped believing in itself somewhere around March. Staff members stared at the crumbling branches scattered across the floor while trying to process his logic. He described the tree as emotionally distant and no longer committed to the holiday spirit. A teenager stacking shelves nearby stopped what he was doing just to watch the exchange unfold. Eventually, the man left with a store credit and the tree left in several garbage bags. 23. A ham resting on the deli scale apparently gave one man an uncomfortable feeling he could not shake off. He claimed the scale looked at him strangely while calculating the weight of his order. The teenage worker behind the counter glanced at the machine, then back at him, unsure how to respond. He demanded the scale be recalibrated immediately, insisting its attitude had thrown off his entire shopping experience. Customers waiting behind him began exchanging glances filled with quiet amusement. A supervisor eventually walked over, reset the scale, and handed him his ham without comment. He nodded slowly, satisfied that justice had finally been served. 24. Emotional damage from a lottery ticket brought one man storming toward the counter demanding his money back. He held up the losing ticket and accused it of lying to him on a deeply personal level. The clerk reminded him that lottery tickets carried no guarantees and were simply games of chance. Undeterred, he argued that hope itself had been sold to him under false pretenses. Bystanders nearby began snickering while pretending to check their phones. A manager arrived, offered him a fresh ticket instead, and he accepted with visible reluctance. Walking away, he muttered that trust was going to take a while to rebuild. 25. Speed and item count sparked a debate when one man treated the express lane like a test of his entire personality. Standing there with a cart full of groceries, he insisted the 10-item rule was simply a suggestion for people who lacked ambition. The cashier tried explaining that the lane existed specifically for smaller purchases. He shrugged off the explanation, claiming efficiency was a mindset rather than a rule. Shoppers behind him groaned audibly while glancing at their watches. Eventually, store staff redirected him to a regular lane, and he walked away, insisting he had won some sort of moral victory. 26. A birthday cake request took an unusual turn when one woman asked the bakery to create something shaped like disappointment but tasteful. The baker paused, pen in hand, unsure how exactly disappointment was supposed to look in frosting form. She elaborated, describing muted colors and a slightly collapsed shape to really capture the mood. Co-workers behind the counter exchanged confused looks while trying to keep straight faces. Eventually, they produced a lopsided gray cake that somehow matched her vision perfectly. She left the bakery smiling and clutched the box like she had finally been understood. 27. Store policy became a personal battle when one man showed up shirtless and shoeless, insisting the rules discriminated against his natural lifestyle. Security approached him calmly and pointed toward the posted sign near the entrance. He argued that clothing was a social construct standing in the way of true freedom. Other shoppers pushed their carts a little faster past the scene, clearly uncomfortable. A manager arrived, offered him a spare shirt from the lost and found, and gently escorted him toward the exit. He left, declaring that society still had a long way to go. 28. Balanced breakfast claims on a cereal box sparked an unexpected identity crisis for one man standing in aisle 4. He picked up the box, stared at the label, and muttered that nothing about his life currently felt balanced at all. A nearby employee restocking shelves asked if he needed help finding a specific item. He shook his head and explained that the cereal box had somehow triggered a much bigger conversation with himself. Other shoppers slowed their carts, curious about the quiet philosophical moment unfolding near the oatmeal. He eventually placed the box back on the shelf and walked away deep in thought. 29. A shopping cart with a slightly bent wheel became the center of one woman's concern near the entrance. She insisted the cart appeared to be limping and deserved a proper wheelchair-accessible replacement. The greeter blinked twice, unsure whether she was joking or completely serious. She continued explaining that every cart deserved dignity regardless of its condition. Other customers passing by tried holding back laughter while grabbing their own carts quickly. Eventually, an employee swapped it for a smoother one, and she thanked him as though a great injustice had finally been corrected. She pushed the new cart proudly toward the entrance. 30. Negotiating milk prices like a used car became one man's mission at the dairy section that afternoon. He crossed his arms, examined the carton closely, and asked the employee if there was any room to negotiate. The confused worker explained that milk prices were fixed and did not typically involve bargaining. He countered by offering slightly less, insisting the carton had a small dent affecting its value. Other shoppers nearby began recording the exchange, clearly entertained by his seriousness. Eventually, he paid full price, muttering that the dairy industry clearly did not respect a good deal. He left still convinced he had lost an important negotiation. 31. Fresh baked bread smelling too aggressively delicious became a formal complaint from one woman standing near the bakery section. She explained that the smell felt overwhelming and almost manipulative in the way it pulled shoppers toward the counter. A young employee stacking loaves nearby asked if she wanted to file the complaint in writing. She said yes and described the aroma as a form of harassment against anyone trying to stick to a grocery list. Other customers nearby laughed quietly while grabbing a loaf for themselves. A manager arrived and apologized for the bread while quietly sliding a free sample toward her. She accepted it and admitted the harassment was actually quite tasty. 32. A jar of pickles allegedly winked at one woman browsing the condiment aisle, and she was not going to let it slide. She flagged down a stock clerk and demanded the jar be removed from the shelf immediately. The confused employee lifted the jar and turned it slowly, looking for any explanation. She insisted the wink felt disrespectful and completely unprofessional for a pickle. A teenager nearby filmed the scene while trying not to laugh out loud. The clerk eventually placed the jar in the back room just to end the conversation. She walked away satisfied that the pickle had finally been held accountable. 33. One man refused to check out until the cashier ranked every item in his cart from healthiest to most emotionally damaging. The cashier stared at the pile of chips, soda, and frozen pizza, unsure where to even begin. He insisted this ranking would help him understand himself before returning home. Customers in line behind him began sighing loudly while checking their phones. A manager arrived and gently placed the soda at the very bottom of the list. He nodded solemnly, as though receiving difficult news from a doctor. He left the store carrying his groceries like a man who had learned something painful about himself. 34. A birthday cake mix-up sent one man storming back into the bakery, demanding a full refund over a single letter. He explained that the cake was decorated with his nickname instead of his legal name, exactly as printed on his identification. The baker apologized and offered to redo the cake free of charge within the hour. He refused the offer and insisted the damage to his identity had already been done. Other customers nearby exchanged amused glances while pretending to browse the donuts. A manager eventually stepped in and issued the refund just to end the standoff. He left clutching the receipt like a small victory. 35. An Employee of the Month photo hanging near the entrance suddenly became a personal challenge for one man standing in line. He stared at the smiling photo and declared that it was radiating what he called main character energy. He demanded equal screen time near the front of the store for himself. The confused greeter asked if he was interested in applying for a job instead. He shook his head and explained that recognition should not require actual employment. A teenager nearby whispered to a friend that this was the strangest thing he had witnessed all week. He eventually walked away, still glancing back at the photo with quiet jealousy. 36. A birthday candle that had already been used once ended up back at customer service thanks to one disappointed man. He explained that the candle failed to grant his wish, despite being blown out with sincere effort. The employee behind the counter gently reminded him that candles were not designed to grant wishes at all. He argued that packaging never clarified this and felt deeply misled by the entire experience. Other shoppers nearby began laughing while trying to appear busy with their own carts. A manager offered him a replacement candle just to resolve the situation quickly. He left holding the new candle with cautious optimism. 37. A small sign reading 10 items or less sparked a grammar debate from one man determined to make his point known. He refused to proceed through checkout until someone corrected it to say fewer instead of less. The cashier tried explaining that the sign had been there for years without complaint. He argued that grammar deserved the same standards as pricing accuracy. Customers behind him began groaning while shifting their weight impatiently. A manager eventually promised to look into updating the sign just to keep the line moving. He walked away satisfied that language had been defended that day. 38. A formal apology on behalf of a cow became the demand of one man standing at the meat counter that afternoon. He insisted the store owed a personal apology delivered directly from the animal responsible for his roast. The confused butcher explained that this request was simply not something the store could arrange. He argued that closure mattered deeply, regardless of species or practicality. Other shoppers nearby exchanged puzzled looks while quietly backing away from the counter. A manager eventually offered a discount instead, just to bring the conversation to an end. He accepted the discount while muttering that justice still felt incomplete. 39. Automatic doors opening too slowly became a personal embarrassment for one man determined to escalate the matter through official channels. He demanded a formal apology routed through store management and forwarded to the manufacturer directly. The greeter explained that the doors operated at a standard speed for every customer. He argued that the delay had caused visible embarrassment in front of other shoppers. Bystanders nearby struggled to hold back laughter while watching the exchange unfold. A manager eventually agreed to file the complaint, just to end the conversation peacefully. He walked out through the same doors, moving just as slowly as before. 40. A cake meant for a joyful occasion turned complicated when one woman requested it say, "It's complicated," instead of "Happy birthday." The baker paused mid-decoration and asked if she wanted to explain the reasoning behind the phrase. She said explaining it would defeat the entire purpose of writing it on a cake. Coworkers nearby exchanged confused glances while trying to finish the rest of the order. The baker eventually completed the cake exactly as requested, without asking further questions. She left the bakery holding the box with a mysterious smile on her face. Other customers in line whispered about what kind of birthday story that cake was hiding. 41. One man walked through the entire store insisting he needed someone to follow him around and validate every choice he made in real time. He explained that shopping alone left him second-guessing every item he placed in his cart. The confused employee asked if he simply wanted product recommendations instead. He insisted validation was different and required genuine emotional support during the entire trip. Other shoppers nearby chuckled while pretending to browse the shelves close enough to listen. A manager eventually walked beside him for a few aisles just to humor the request. He left the store thanking the manager as though a great friendship had formed that day. 42. Squeaking loudly with every turn one shopping cart became a personal enemy for the man pushing it through the aisles. He claimed the noise was narrating his life in a deeply negative way and demanded it be replaced immediately. The confused employee swapped the cart without much resistance, hoping to end the odd complaint quickly. He pushed the new cart forward and listened carefully for any hint of judgment. Other shoppers nearby laughed quietly while grabbing their own carts from the row. He nodded with visible relief once the new wheels rolled silently across the floor. He left the store convinced his story finally had a happier soundtrack. 43. Near the entrance, a patch of carpet became the target of blame for one man demanding free groceries over what he called an unlucky start to his day. He explained that stepping on the carpet had ruined his mood before he even grabbed a cart. The confused greeter asked if something specific had actually happened to him that morning. He said the carpet simply felt cursed, and the store needed to take responsibility. Other customers nearby exchanged amused glances while stepping around him carefully. A manager offered him a small discount just to keep the line moving smoothly. He left still eyeing the carpet suspiciously on his way out. 44. Returning a pair of sunglasses purchased earlier that same week, one man claimed the sun had somehow followed him home. He explained that the glasses were no longer necessary since sunlight now appeared inside his own living room. The confused employee asked if he simply meant that his windows let in light. He shook his head and insisted this was something far more personal and unusual. Other customers nearby tried holding back laughter while waiting for their own refunds. A manager eventually processed the return just to avoid further explanation. He left the store wearing sunglasses anyway, just in case. 45. 10 years of ordering the exact same sandwich became the basis for one man's demand at the deli counter for a retroactive loyalty punch card. He explained that this level of dedication deserved some form of official recognition after so long. The confused employee asked if he had ever mentioned this loyalty before today. He said true dedication did not require constant announcements or reminders. Other customers in line began whispering while trying to calculate the sandwich total in their heads. A manager eventually handed him a free sandwich just to acknowledge the effort. He left holding it like a hard-earned trophy. 46. Labeled day-old bread, a discount sign near the bakery sparked outrage from one man who called the wording ageist and deeply insensitive. He argued that bread deserved the same respect regardless of how many days had passed since baking. The confused employee explained that the label simply helped customers understand freshness levels. He insisted freshness should never be tied to something as sensitive as age. Other shoppers nearby laughed quietly while grabbing a discounted loaf for themselves. A manager eventually offered to relabel it as slightly seasoned, just to end the debate. He left satisfied that bread everywhere had been defended that day. 47. Deep in thought near the yogurt shelves, one man suddenly requested a designated quiet zone sign be installed for that exact spot. He explained that this particular section was where he made his most important life decisions. The confused employee asked if he needed help finding a specific flavor instead. He said flavor was secondary to the reflection process happening in his mind. Other shoppers nearby tried to squeeze past quietly while holding back laughter. A manager promised to consider the suggestion just to keep him calm and moving. He nodded slowly and returned to staring at the yogurt shelf in silence. 48. Pointing toward his cart full of candy chips and energy drinks, one man demanded the pharmacist diagnose his mood based entirely on those contents. The confused pharmacist explained that diagnosing moods required more than snack choices. He argued that groceries revealed more truth than any conversation ever could. Other customers nearby laughed quietly while glancing at their own carts with sudden concern. The pharmacist eventually offered a light-hearted guess just to satisfy the request. He nodded seriously, as though receiving an official medical diagnosis. He walked away convinced the candy aisle had exposed something deeply personal. 49. At the checkout counter, a stack of Monopoly money appeared from one man determined to pay for his groceries using it instead of real currency. He explained that money itself was simply a construct, and the cashier should read more theory before judging his method. The confused cashier calmly explained that only real currency was accepted at the register. He argued that questioning the nature of value was more important than following outdated rules. Other customers in line began laughing while recording the exchange on their phones. A manager eventually escorted him toward the exit, still holding his colorful fake bills. He left declaring that society simply was not ready for his ideas yet. Well, there you have it. 49 humans who somehow convinced themselves that pickles, winking, and squeaky carts were personal attacks from the universe. If any of these made you laugh out loud or ugly gasp in public, that's exactly why you're part of the BrainFumble family now. Smash that like button before the self-checkout machine gets jealous. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next round of unhinged customer chaos. And if you actually shared a laugh with a friend, go ahead and share this video too, they need it. Now drop a comment and tell us which entitled customer moment made you say absolutely not.